Hello and welcome to Outdoor Gear Chat. I am your host, Cathy, and today we are talking kit lists, alpine climbing. And with me today is a very highly qualified person to guide us through this really interesting topic. We've got Tom Ripley. Hi, Tom.
Hello.
Tom, you're a British IFMGA guide, and I know you're currently based in the French Alps, but I think you're probably shortly off on a big trip somewhere. Are you off to New Zealand?
Yeah, that's the plan. I'm going to New Zealand the middle of next month for a year, just for
A year?
for a year to go and see what it's like to work in different hemisphere and learn about snow pickets and big rucksacks and stripy long johns, all that sort of Kiwi stuff. Um, but yeah, currently I'm a mountain guide based near Chamonix.
Awesome. And I know you're originally from the Lake District and you know our shops very well. Obviously, if you're in the Lake District, you would have known the Climbers Shop. But you did actually work for us at Joe Brown's in Wales while you were studying at Bangor University, I think.
Yeah, so I worked there for not very long, like just after I had finished studying, and I probably would have stayed and worked for quite a while because I really liked it. But then I moved to Sheffield because my partner at the time got a job over there, so we moved to Sheffield. But no, I've always loved outdoor kit, and I also really like sails. So yeah, it was really fun, and it was great because you're in Capel Curig or in Clonberis, so it's really good for going climbing after work or biking for work and that sort of thing.
Such a
Yeah.
potted location, isn't it, North Wales? I love it because
Uh,
it doesn't matter what the weather's doing, you can just sort of move a stone's throw away and just either move on to a different rock, or if it's that bad, you can just go to the beach.
yeah. Or the beacon.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I know while you were at uni, you were climbing a long time before you started uni. You've been climbing for since you were a kid, but you did some pretty hefty trips and expeditions while you were there out to Pakistan, Peru, Alaska. So you sort of had a very rounded experience before you started on your British Mountain Guides journey and qualified in 2023. So I think it's really interesting to sort of probably kick off by asking, just for sort of people that aren't familiar with what alpinism is, but what it is and kind of how you got into it, moving from sort of Lakeland crags and out into higher mountains and the snowy, icy environment.
Oh, so what is alpinism? Alpinism, I guess, is climbing big mountains, typically like the ones in the Alps, so big snowy mountains, and generally there is a sort of ethic that you like as alpine style climbing. So you start at the bottom of the mountain with you and your friend, and all you have is what you both have in your rucksacks to get to the top. And I found that was like a really rewarding thing to go and do and to think about, and the problem solving, particularly when I was organizing those sort of expeditions, is how you would transfer those skills that you take from the Alps into a bigger environment. And I that was the thing that I found really fascinating, made me tick. But I guess, but actually, question: what is alpinism? Alpinism is climbing in the Alps, and the mountains we have in the Alps are they're pretty much perfect in terms of accessibility. They're sort of near lots of population bases in France, Switzerland, Austria, Italy, so they're pretty easy to get to. They're roughly between 3,000 meters and I think Mont Blanc's 4,800 meters. So they're at a fairly like accessible altitude. You don't have to spend months and months trying to get acclimatized. They have glaciers on them and snow and ice. The snow and ice is becoming trickier. Like glaciers are retreating, and the ice faces that used to be things people could climb in June and July 20 years ago, now they some of them don't even get climbed at all, or they have to come into condition like a sort of ephemeral Scottish winter route. So it's all getting a little bit tricky with climate change. I think one of the other things that's really different about the Alps compared to other places in the world is we have huts and we have lifts. So you can get into the mountains with sort of fairly minimal effort, which allows you to travel quite light. So yeah, alpine climbing is typically about climbing stuff quickly, and it's not climbing quickly for the hell of it, though I guess there is an aspect of that. It's also climbing quickly because you're in a dangerous, high risk, changeable environment. And if you spend more time in there, the more likely it's the weather to come in or something, or there to be rockfall or anything. So it's all about,
Yeah, kind of moving slickly, isn't it?
yeah,
Moving together, pitching, and just getting just well, I suppose fluid. I suppose having a fluid
yeah.
day out,
Fluid
and
is a really good word, and that's like the real skill, particularly as a British climber, you've got to like master is to move from somewhere where you've got all the time in the world, and it doesn't really matter if you're late off Gimmer because you might walk down by head torch, but if you're I don't know if you're late on something in the Alps, like I don't know, say the Zinal Rothorn or something, you maybe have to cross the glacier in the afternoon when the glacier is soft and the snow bridges are weaker, and you're much more likely to fall into a crevasse, or the weather often comes in the afternoon. So yeah, it's all about early starts and moving fluidly.
yeah, early starts and that train of head torches snaking up in front of you, or trying to be at the front of that train of head torches
Yeah,
snaking up in front
yeah,
of you. If you're on a popular route like Mont Blanc or something
yeah,
like that,
totally.
but it is really interesting, like you were saying about the glaciers and that change in uh, climbing and what time of year you might climb. And it is, I suppose, my first trip to the Alps was probably 25, 30 years ago. And in that time, visibly, you can see the glacier, how much they've receded, can't you? It is literally that shorter time frame, and it's completely visual.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was an aspirant guide in 2020, and I remember we went to the Mwari Hut, and we were able to walk there up the glacier to get to the lower glacier to do an École de Glace. And I went back there last year, or maybe the year before. Yeah, the year before. And to get to that bit of glacier, we had to walk down from the hut because the bit that we'd walked up to get onto the glacier had receded in that time. And it's like, yeah, it's pretty. Yeah, the glaciers in the Alps are the sort of canary in the coal mine for climate change.
They are still there for now, and it's a fantastic arena for sport.
Yeah, no, no, the glaciers are still there, but for how much longer and what state climbing will be, like alpine climbing will be in, when I'm 50 or whatever, will be remains to be seen. I mean, people will
Yeah.
still be doing it because people adapt and things happen differently. But yeah, I think yeah, what was viewed as like normal classic things to do in July and August is very different. The first time I went to the Alps in 2005, we rode the Montanvers train, climbed the ladders down onto the Mer de Glace, and once you got off the bottom of the ladders, I'm pretty sure you walked about 5 meters on moraine, and then you were on blue ice where you could go and walk around and do an École de Glace and like learn to use your crampons and that sort of thing. Now you probably would have to walk for an hour.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
big difference.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess that winter summer, that shift in choosing when it's perhaps when it's safe to climb or safer to climb, it's obviously a very subjective environment. Do you have any favorite routes, and how have you got ones now that you used to climb in the summer that you'll only climb in the winter? Has it kind of changed that way?
I mean, I've got lots of favorite routes, but I've probably not really been guiding long enough to have routes that thankfully I can't, that as winter only routes. But a favorite route of mine would be the Weissmies from the Almagella Hut, which I think is like the southeast ridge. I probably should check that. And that's like a really fantastic 4,000 meter peak, really friendly hut, and it's a really good option for Brits on a first trip because it's fairly straightforward ridge scrambling, sort of akin to sort of like a like a big North Ridge of Tryfan, with a little bit of snow and ice climbing at the top, just sort of cramponing along snow on a sort of shallow arête to get to this nice summit. And then it's probably safest to retrace your steps back to the hut and then either have a second night in the hut and walk out the next day, or flog your way down that evening, sort of regretting your decisions. And or you can walk down the other side on a big Sirac threatened glacier and get on a chairlift, which is quick, but you are rolling the dice slightly. That'd be a favorite introductory route. And then a sort of harder alpine route, I really like climbing the Eiger by the Mittelegi Ridge, either the long one, the integral, or the normal standard one. And I just think that's fantastic because you get a train up through the mountain, cross this cool glacier, do a little bit of pitched big boot climbing to get off the glacier, and then you sort of wander, following your nose, up some sort of scrambling terrain to get to the hut. And the Mittelegi hut's like really nice, it's like perched on the side of the Eiger, and a very friendly place. And there's only about 30 beds, so that sort of keeps the route less busy, which is nice. And also the really nice thing about the Mittelegi is it traverses, so you go over the Eiger and down to the Monkjoch hut, and then you take the Jungfrau train down. So there's no like bottlenecks with people coming down. The fastest people come down as you're going up. So that'd be a favorite sort of classic alpine route.
Sounds like it's got everything going for it. Trains, iconic mountain peaks.
Yeah, and it's not even that high. It's not 4,000 meters. So you like acclimatization is nowhere near as big a deal as it is say on the Matterhorn, which is like 4,400 meters.
If you're heading out for a classic alpine day, and that absolutely sounds, as I say, it kind of sort of ticks all the boxes, what is there that you absolutely never leave home without?
I mean, I've forgotten most things over the years, but on a route like that, I guess I just go through what I'd like wear and take on a route like that rather than what I wouldn't leave home, because I try not to take things on routes like that I can be okay to forget. So
Yeah.
I guess my sort of clothing sort of setup for that is I've got a pair of like lightweight sort of scrambling boots, like Scarpa Zodiac, I think at the moment, or a Scarpa Charmos or a Rebel, those sort of things. Then I'd have a pair of lightweight sort of soft shell trousers, some sort of wicking boxers, or if I'm walking into a hut, I might strap the trousers to my bag and walk in running shorts.
Right.
And then base layer, I'd have I like a long sleeve one with a hood that can go over a helmet, because that is a really good for protecting you from the sun, which is like a massive hazard for alpine climbing. Being sunburned is not very nice at all. Really bad for you long term. I mean, I've got lots of colleagues who have had bits of melanoma cut off their faces, and I'm pretty keen to avoid that. And then I'd probably have a sort of insulated mid layer with a hood and a chest pocket. I really like a chest pocket so I can keep my phone in it, and I have my phone in a little leash so I don't drop it. And it's quite good for having like some snacks, like some nuts or Haribo if it's a tricky route. I try not to eat Haribo every day because it's bad for my teeth and I've had too many fillings. And then I'd have sort of one sort of insulated layer, like a lightweight down or synthetic jacket, and I'd have like a lightweight waterproof, because I'm sort of British and I can't get my head around not having a waterproof with me. Pretty lightweight end of the spectrum, like the waterproof be like a sort of running one or a very lightweight climbing one, not like a sort of thing you'd use to get yourself across the Cairngorm Plateau in winter. And then what else do I have? I'd have a pair of gloves, and I normally get leather gardening gloves because they do the job pretty well and they wear out. And I'd like to have a loop of cord tied onto those, then clip onto your harness. Then I like to have a lightweight pair of mitts in my bag, because if my hands get cold, I find it's much easier to re-warm them. And if they get cold, I probably have a couple of buffs to use as like a head sort of like an ear warmer and a neck warmer and a bit of sun protection. Have a pair of category 4 glasses if I'm going on a glacier, with sort of wraparound ones, and it's really important that they fit well, because if they don't fit well, they let light in, they hurt your eyes. I take 2 pairs of sunglasses, mainly because if you drop a pair, it's not very nice, and you can't really move around on a glacier, but also, or if my client drops a pair. But I also have a pair with a changeable lens, because if you're in flat light, like if it's clouds over or you're rock climbing, I find it's really difficult to see with category 4 glasses. They're like too full on. But if you use the changeable ones, it means you can see in the cloudy day or rock climbing. And I find if I don't wear glasses at all, then my eyes sort of get like cooked. I have a massive headache at the end of the day. High factor sun cream, so factor 50 sun cream, and a lip balm. That's generally what I'm wearing. And then I'll have a pair of crampons. So normally 12-point mountaineering crampons, so like a Petzl Vasak's really good, or a Gravel G12 that fit your boots. And I have those with the sort of semi-automatic thing, so they don't have the wire bail. I often actually wear, which is not very fashionable, but I often actually wear little short gaiters because I find that that really helps keep snow out of your boots. So I might wear those on the glacier, and then when I take my crampons off, I might take the gaiters off and use them as like a sort of crampon bag. I like to make sure my crampons are relatively sharp, especially if there's going to be any ice or like glacial ice involved. Like if it's like a snow climb, I'll wear like quite sharp crampons, and I'll have a sort of older pair that I might use on a more sort of rocky mixed ridge. And generally they all get they all get blunt eventually, but I sort of have a sort of hierarchy of crampons. Harness, pretty simple harness. Like I've got something with fixed leg loops and 4 gear loops. One of the thing my sort of bugbears with lightweight harnesses is they never have good gear loops. They don't have lots of gear loops, but it'd be really handy if someone made a lightweight harness with 2 really good gear loops, because then you can fit a little rack on. And then a helmet. I sort of like, yeah, traditionally I would have always used a lightweight one, like like a Petzl Meteor style one. And I still do use those sort of things a lot. But I have started using a heavier helmet a little bit because I think for rockfall they protect you much better, and like that's a major hazard. And they're also a little bit more robust if you sit on them, and which is generally how I break a helmet. And then a rack. I have a joke with my friend Tim Miller about the rack of 4, which is a good rack for sort of AD climb. So it's 4 wires, so like a 2, a 4, a 6, and an 8. 4 cams, so probably like a little blue one, a purple one, a red, and a gold one. 4 quick draws, 4 slings, and that will get you up a lot of AD sort of ground in the Alps, because you don't need your big sort of rack that you'd go rock climbing with, because you're only scrambling, and if it's a little short pitch, it's probably only a little short pitch. Then you need sort of glacier travel kit, so 1 or 2 ice screws each. A micro traction and a tiblock is good for hauling people out of a crevasse. And then the other stuff, like your belay plate, and it's good to have like a plaquette belay plate, like a reverso or a pivot, for those sort of, so you can belay people directly off bolts, which is handy if you're trying to eat lunch and keep moving, look at the topo. It's good to have a topo, and I always have a map and a compass. Recently, I've started using one of those fancy GPS watches, which I really like.
Me too, actually. In fact, funnily enough, we're going to be talking with Sunto in the not too distant future.
Well, I've got a Sunto one, and I'm like a sort of tech nerd. I really like it.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there, because I've kind of held off having any form of tech for years, and and then I did a trip last autumn, and one of the ladies who was with me used one for the first time, and I was like, actually, that's really beneficial. I would have just spent like lost hours wondering if I was in the right place and checking the map, instead of just like, oh, check the watch, yeah, bang on, off I go. And it made a big difference to time, definitely, for me.
Yeah, no, totally. Well, yeah, I was exactly the same as you, and then I was working with a colleague early last summer, and we were in a whiteout on a glacier, and I was like getting a compass out and kept checking my phone to look at the map, and it was all pretty tricky. And he was like, "Look, just take my watch and just hold it square like a compass and look at it, and just follow the red line back to the lift." And I was like, "Oh yeah, that's much easier."
As long as you got a charger.
Yeah, my one seems to last pretty long. And then it's always quite good, because at the end of the day you turn it off and it tells you that you need to rest for like 4 weeks before you go outside again, and then you're like, oh well, I've got to guide the mat on tomorrow, so I guess I'll be okay. Bit of abseil tats handy, bit of 6mm cord, that's pretty good. And then ropes. Ropes is a tricky one. Lots of ropes for lots of different situations. I always think that when you drive out to the Alps, you should pack for every eventuality. Like if you don't take any sport climbing gear, you'll end up going sport climbing. Whereas if you take all your sport climbing stuff, the weather will be on your side, and you'll do all those amazing alpine routes you'd wanted to do. But typically for most classic alpinism, like a 50-meter lightweight single rope, like a Beal Joker or whichever ones you guys stock, they're all with the dry treated one. They're all really good.
Does come into its own when you're working on in a glacier environment, or you're working in a snow and ice environment where that water the
Yeah,
rope can just get drenched, can't it? And they get
yeah,
really heavy when they get wet, and
yeah,
then end
exactly.
up
Yeah,
handling like horrendously. But
yeah.
Vale less so, actually. I think the way they make their ropes, their handling is just, I think they're a step ahead. But the Edelrid ropes that we stock, and I think also the waterproof coating actually makes a difference if you're just using it in the UK, or if you're using it in a really dry, dusty environment as well. It does
Yeah.
give that extra protection and just keeps a little bit extra out, and just helps that longevity of the rope, I think, over time too.
No, totally. Yeah, I mean, and it's a pretty small price premium, I think, to pay for a waterproof rope. If you've ever got a rope wet and then it's got cold and it's frozen, they're a real nightmare to handle. If I'm walking to a hut, I'll probably, especially if I'm going back to the same hut, I will nearly always walk in like big comfy running shoes, like Hoka shoes, and I'll take a walking stick or two, and I'll just leave those in the hut while I go climbing, and then I'll come back and I'll just carry my boots on the outside of my rucksack because I just find that it hurts my knees less. And then to stay in an alpine hut, so an alpine hut is it's like a sort of posh. It's not like a bothy like we'd have in Scotland, or it's like a youth hostel in the middle of nowhere where you can buy beer and Coke and Rusty, and they normally cost about 80 to 100 quid a night for a three-course evening meal and breakfast in the morning. And considering that a lot of them are supplied by helicopter, I think that's pretty good value. And they're often, and the hut guardians are often super friendly, and they're a really good source of like advice for where to go and what conditions are like on the mountains. So if I'm staying in a hut, you don't really need to take very much extra stuff. So I can normally get everything that additional I would take in like a very small stuff sack. So it's normally like what do I take? I take a pair of glasses because I can't see. I take contact lenses. I normally take double the number of contact lenses I need. I'd have disposable ones. Folding toothpaste, little deodorant, a little bit of travel toothpaste, and then I take a spare pair of very thin socks to wear in the hut slippers. So the huts normally provide everyone Crocs to wear, so take some spare socks, and then a silk sleeping bag liner to sleep in. And then I take a power bank, any cables I might need to charge my phone or my head torch. If it's not like a lot of the time in the Alps, we only start like 2 hours before dark, so you don't need like a brilliant head torch like you would to go fell running in the winter. So a lot of the time I just use a Petzl Bindi, which is like a really lightweight battery powered head torch. So and they're so light that I just take two in case someone drops one and breaks or something. So that's my hut kit. And then my luxury item, I have one luxury item is a pair of rechargeable headphones so I can catch up with my favorite podcast while I'm snoozing in the afternoon.
In the sunshine, out on the deck of the hut.
Definitely not. I try and spend as much time inside as possible at the end of the day because I'm already sunburnt enough. Yeah, so normally inside or
Yeah.
in the guides room.
It's interesting with the huts, like you're saying, that they're sort of around about that £100 a night. And I'm really pleased that you mentioned, they are restocked by helicopters a lot of the time. They are a fantastic source. And it's easy, I think, if you're maybe planning your first trip out to the Alps and thinking, oh God, that the expense of staying in the huts. But the difference that makes well, you don't necessarily perhaps, I suppose, get a full night's sleep because you've got people getting up at different times, and you might be sort of crammed in. There's one night in one of the Mont Blanc huts. Oh my God, it was sardine like. I think there was a storm, and
Yeah, no,
that was,
they're gross, those ones.
yeah. They probably must be the busiest, actually, among the
I would have
busiest.
thought so, yeah. And they're
Yeah,
so
and
high that it's really difficult for them to keep them like super clean and stuff because like there's
yeah.
no running water and everything. But I mean, huts are expensive, but you're not obliged to buy dinner. So you can just stay and pay for the night, and then it's much more reasonable price. It's maybe like 25-ish pounds a night just for the night, and you can bring your own food and a jet boil or whatever and cook on the stove. So if you're on it and cook on the side of the terrace, and that's absolutely no problem. And normally they're pretty understanding of those sort of things. They're like mountain people too. And then I guess the other option if you're on a budget is bivvying, which is
So that's just
great.
miserable.
Now, bivvying can be really nice, especially if you're doing a mountain where you come back to the base, so you don't have to carry all your bivy gear up and over, so you can take a bit more luxury stuff and
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, sleeping bag, bivy bag. But yeah, by the time you've bought all that expensive stuff, you might as well spend the money in the hut. There is something really nice about going to sleep in an alpine meadow and with just you and your friend and cooking dinner rather than being crammed into a sweaty room.
Well, that's a different Alpine bivvy experience. I was envisaging like snow, ice, and
Oh
just
yeah.
being wet and
Well,
cold and shivering outside a hut, thinking I really should have spent that money and stayed in the warm.
yeah, no, that is a different experience. I mean, yeah, you do have I mean, then obviously there's like proper bivvying, like on a route, like on a sort of Alpine North Face, which is pretty life enriching and memorable. And but in my experience, yeah, not something I do all the time, but like, yeah, it's really, really cool. Or I guess the thing that I always have in my two things that I always have in my rucksack that we've not talked about is I always have some sort of first aid kit, and then I also always have a bothy bag, so like a little 2 or 4 person survival shelter, like made of silicon nylon that you both can get into, and you'll be pretty cold and pretty condensated, but you probably won't die. Whereas if you get caught out in a storm without one, it might be a little bit more exciting. And I would recommend that people buy the more expensive lightweight ones because they're smaller and lighter, and you will always keep it in your rucksack. Whereas if you buy the heavier ones, they're a bit bulky and they're a bit heavy. So you'll probably, when you're packing a bag, you've not got too much space left. You go, oh, sod it, let's not take the bothy bag. And over the years, I've spent quite a few nights in bothy bags. Never at work, I don't think. No, not at work. I can't remember doing that at work. Yeah, quite a few nights climbing with my friends when it's just gone on a little bit longer than you planned, and everything's always easier in the daylight. You
Yeah.
can see where you're going and that sort of thing. So it might be better to have a few hours rest, spooning your friend, lying on top of the rope, and then get up the next morning and continue on the way down.
But the bothy bags actually take on a new life form as you kind of take your life journey and kids arrive on the scene, because we've used ours for
Yeah,
sandwiches and lunch, and it makes a massive difference when you got little ones that chill down in like no time at all.
yeah,
And
totally.
and you can just, and it's a great adventure when you're sitting there
Yeah,
in orange.
I mean, my first bothy bag experience was exactly that, like going out with my parents hill walking, and we used to call them kissus, which I think is
Yeah, instructor
carry
survival
more.
unit.
Yeah, there you go, instructor
Yeah.
survival unit. So yeah, yeah, I can remember getting in the kissu and having a flask of tea or something, like on Blencathra in the rain or something gross like that.
Equally life enriching.
Yeah, all formative, yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure my daughters agree, but the memories are there, they're embedded.
Yeah, well, I don't think I agreed at the time, but I'm sure,
Hindsight's a wonderful thing.
yeah, yeah.
So obviously as a mountain guide, actually I tell you what would be really interesting for people to understand, because you don't just take an exam to become a mountain guide, do you? There is a huge amount involved to get the qualification that you have. And I think if you're able just to sort of give a brief overview of what that involves, I think that'd be really interesting.
So a mountain guide or IFMGA mountain guide, and IFMGA stands for International Federation of Mountain Guide Associations, or as somebody once pointed out to me, I forgot my girlfriend again. So it's a qualification that allows you to take people climbing and skiing in any mountain terrain all over the world. And it's particularly important in the Alps because in the Alps, unlike the UK, it's a legal requirement if you want to take people into mountains to be an IFMGA mountain guide. And there are lots of different countries that have their mountain guide training schemes and mountain guide associations. I trained through the British one. There's French, Italian, Austrian, German, American, Peruvian. And the idea is that the IFMGA oversees those training schemes, and that the mountain guides at the end of it should all be roughly of a similar sort of standard. We should all be able to do, give or take a little bit, roughly the same thing. So we should all be able to take people skiing. We should all be able to take people alpine climbing. So I trained through the British scheme, and to become a British mountain guide, before you start, you need to have a sort of substantial amount of rock climbing experience. So sort of 50 good multi-pitch climbs up to sort of E1 as a sort of minimum. Good amount of Scottish winter climbing, so 50 Scottish winter climbs, 20 at grade 5 in a sort of wide variety of crags. So it'd be good if you've been to Craigmeggy and Lochnagar and Leotach and Ben A, rather than just Corrinlochen and Corrinsnectar and Ben Nevis. So it's good to have a sort of depth and breadth of Scottish winter experience. And then we expect to be a pretty solid off-piste skier and have experience of hut ski touring and sort of complicated day tours in glacial terrain. Then for alpinism, we expect you to have done 20 major alpine routes. So major alpine route would be something like the Hornley Ridge on the Matterhorn, you know, a sort of route that's about AD and goes to a major summit. And then of those 20, we want 5 of them to be 800-meter sort of mixed routes, like what people call a grand course. So like a classic North Face would be a good example, or a big, long, complicated ridge. So something like the Putre Integral on Mont Blanc, or the Centre Pillar Fresnay on Mont Blanc, or North Face the Eiger, North Face the Matterhorn, Walker Spur on the Grand Duras, Gervais City Pillar on Mont Blanc to tackle. So those sort of things. We'd like to done 5 of those. And then we'd like to do another sort of 5 sort of shorter TD routes. Maybe something like the Cassin on the Pisbadil, or the West Ridge on the Salbert. So, or like a sort of Chamonix Gulot climb, like the Rebefat Terrain on the Pelerin, or the super cool one Mont Blanc to tackle, those sort of things. So that's the sort of entry requirements for training to be a guide. And then it can take a minimum of 3 years. And what we do is we induct you to check that you can climb and ski at the required standard. And they're just sort of tests of your personal standard. And then we train you and assess you in rock climbing in Snowdonia, and then go on to train and assess you in winter climbing in the Cairngorms and over in Loch Arbour. And these are, it's normally like a 5-day training course and a 6-day assessment. And the idea is to teach you how to look after people on climbs up to E1 and winter climbs up to grade 5, move people up and down the mountain, with the sort of ideas that you'll then be progressing on to being an aspirant guide. And once you pass the Scottish winter assessment, you then go to the Alps and complete a ski touring assessment course and a alpine climbing training course. Sorry, a ski touring training course and an alpine climbing training course, where they train you to look after people in a more alpine environment on skis. And then you work for 2 summers and 1 winter as what's called an aspirant guide, which is basically a guide's apprentice. So you work under direct supervision of a guide who's been qualified for 3 years, and you go climbing and skiing with those people and their clients. And then you have to do a 6-day ski touring assessment, where your ability to look after people on skis is assessed, and a 6-day alpine climbing assessment, where your ability to look after people, like moving them around alpine terrain, is assessed. And then there's also a couple of little bits on ice climbing, and there's a little bit and there's quite a lot on avalanche. There's sort of 3 5-day avalanche training courses that are sort of like interlinked with the guide training, because that's like a major hazard of guiding, and like both on skis and when you're winter climbing.
It's pretty intense, isn't it? It's pretty involved. And
sounds really difficult. I don't know how I managed to make my way through it. Like, I was like, wow, it's like, is that really what you have to do? Yeah. So it's an intense and involved 3-year process, and it's like a it's like a full-time or like semi-full-time vocational training, a bit like doing like it's like being it's basically vocational training, like
Yes.
training to be a, I don't know, electrician or something. Probably like
Yeah.
more sunburn and less skiing. No, no,
More
more
skiing.
sunburn and more skiing, yeah.
I think one of the things we obviously deal a lot with the guides. We're the preferred retailers for the British Mountain Guides, and over the years we've gotten to know a lot of guides, and I think the thing that always comes back to us is the professionalism. It always comes across with the guides that we meet and that we speak to. And for somebody who's thinking, oh, why should I buy a guide to go out and do something that I could do myself? Well, I think personally, if I've been tagging on a climbing trip onto a work trip, which is in my life quite, that's the only
Yeah.
way I can get away. It means I don't have to worry about anything. I've got a guide with me. I can just go out. I can go up onto to whatever peak, out into the terrain, and it doesn't matter how tired I am or my brain's not working. I still need to eat and feed and look after myself and keep myself warm, but I can actually, all that stress of, or what becomes a stress, it should be enjoyable, all the planning aspect, and I do love that aspect and the self-sufficiency aspect. But if I'm on a very short timeline, it takes all that away and I don't have to worry about it, and I can just have a fantastic day, 2 days out in the high mountains, and take away that experience with me. Once you've got it, it's there forever. And there's a few trips I've done that have been really important to me with a guide. it's
Yeah,
it's made a big difference.
no, totally. And I also think you can just, it's a really good option for people who are like time poor, because I can remember trips I had to the Alps where we'd go for 2 weeks and we'd get two things done, whereas normally
Yeah.
a 6 day guiding week, well, you'd hope to get, unless you're really unlucky with the weather, you'd hope to get 3 or 4 things done, including days where you walk to huts and that sort of thing. Yeah, it's a good productive use of time, and it's just somebody who can go like, "Oh, well, what on earth do we do now? Because the weather's doing this," and they'll probably go like, "Oh, well, we can drive down over." They'll ring their mate up. You ring your mate up, and then you're like, "Oh, well, we'll just drive a few hours over this way," and suddenly you're in this beautiful valley that no one's ever heard of, and you're climbing these great mountains.
A different country. We'll nip over to Italy and we'll go and do a route
Yeah,
over there and then come back.
yeah, and cross our fingers that it doesn't rain, and if it doesn't, we'll get a pizza and it'll all be good anyway. Yeah,
We've
but no,
done
I
that,
think
yeah. We went to the Alps for a week in years and years and years ago, 2 weeks, and ended up climbing in the Calanque on the Verdon, because the weather was absolutely grim. And we went back and stopped in Chamonix just to see if there was any sort of last
yeah,
vestiges of something to be gained. And the cloud hadn't really gone above tent level for 2 weeks, and there'd been people sitting in their tent the whole time. And we're like, well, I
yeah.
mean, we've got some amazing climbing down in the south, but we didn't,
Well,
well, everything's still there to be done in the future.
well, totally. And I think the less goal orientated somebody is, the more likely they are to have an enjoyable time. Like
Yeah,
I guided some of the last 2 days, and we ended up going rock climbing, and we both he had a really good time. But
yeah,
he'd booked to skin up the Dufour-Spitz, the second highest mountain in the Alps. But thankfully he wasn't bothered. He was like, "Well, I'm just having a nice time," and that makes my job really easy. Whereas when people don't enjoy the plan B and they're only there to climb, and it's typically with Mont Blanc, the Matterhorn, and the Haute Route. They're the
yeah,
typical ones where people are like, "I have to do these," and you're like, well,
yeah,
like just
yeah,
because you're with a guide doesn't guarantee success.
yeah.
Hopefully, guarantees safety. Or
Yes, yeah.
but you've got to, mountains.
You just got to adapt, haven't you?
Yeah, if mountains weren't like changeable dynamic environments, everyone would be climbing them. There'd be, you've got to be able to adapt and accept. I've been coming to the Alps for I guess nearly 20 years, and I've still never climbed the Grand Duras. I'm sure I'll climb it one day, but just got to be patient. Took me 3 trips to Yosemite to climb Mount Cap.
Yeah, it's just the way it goes. So,
Yeah.
for you, what's been your best day out of all time so far?
In terms of actual enjoyment while I was doing it, the West Bridge of the Salbitchen in Switzerland was really good. Salbitchen's like a really cool mountain. I think it's like just shy of 3,000 meters, and it's really brilliant place. There's not really any snow and ice, but it's fantastic, really high quality rock climbing, really nice hut. Anyway, I went over there with my friend John, and well, I forgot my harness, so that was annoying. So thankfully, we knew someone very slightly who lived nearby, and she lent me her spare harness. So I climbed this 30 pitch rock climb in a size 8 woman's harness that was sort of just about fitted around my waist. So in terms of actual enjoyment, that would be high up there, and it's like 30 pitches, and it climbs up these 6 towers. So you normally do 6 pitches, do a couple of abseils, do 6 more pitches, do a couple of abseils, and on really high quality granite, are sort of like tricky for me, but like not that tricky standard. Like lots of sort of hard VSC1 climbing with the odd little bit which might have been a bit harder, and a bit of aid climbing at the top. Well, I aided it, John freed it, but yeah. And then I guess probably all-time day out, but maybe less enjoyable. I did it. It's a long time ago. I climbed the Casson Ridge on Denali with Tom Livingston, and we did. That was a really brilliant trip where we climbed. We had sort of 4 day round trip from base camp and sort of 2 days on the route, and just thought it was an amazing thing to do when we were like both in our very early 20s. I've got really fond memories of sort of dropping our rucksacks and sort of slogging to the last 50 meters to the summit and at sunset. So that was pretty cool.
Oh, amazing. And there is actually YouTube video footage of that trip as well.
Yeah, you can find it. I think it's on Tom's Vimeo. Maybe it is on
Yeah,
YouTube, but
yeah.
yeah, I refound it the other day and watched it, and it's amazing. Like just like what we didn't know. Like we camped on this glacier, and then the next day we put up our tent. There's this video of us just soloing over the Bergstrom with no rope on, and it's like, what on earth? What on earth are we thinking? And I can remember, and this was like 2012, I think. So it's like, what, 13 years ago now. So we took petrol stoves because we didn't really trust that a gas stove malfunction. And anyway, by the time we'd got to the top and back to the high camp on the West Buttress, both the pumps. So we'd taken 2 fuel bottles, and we, instead of putting a lid on them, we'd put a pump in each fuel bottle. But anyway, both the pumps had broken, so we couldn't melt snow. So we were pretty thirsty. So there's a ranger camp at 17,000 feet, which was near where we'd put our little sort of single skin tent up, and I was like, oh, I'm so thirsty. I'm going to go and ask them if we could use their stove or if we could borrow some gas or something. And anyway, so sort of sheepish go and knock on the door of this ranger's tent, and like, oh, I'm really sorry. We just climbed the Cassin Ridge and our stove's not working. Is there any chance? Is there any chance we could use your stove? And we've got this like big, friendly American welcome. Like, you guys just climbed the Cassin. You come in here, and they cooked us brews for a couple of hours, and then we slogged back
Oh,
down to base
amazing.
camp. Yeah, really, really
Fantastic.
funny.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, what a trip. What a trip. Oh, well,
Yeah.
it's been fantastic talking to you, Tom. Thank you, and getting
Cheers.
just getting an insight into the training and how you work on the hill, and I think there's a ton of great information there for people that are planning to go out to the Alps and go hut to hut and just think about what to carry with them and what not to carry with them. Make it light and enjoyable, and how you can change what you take depending on what you plan to do, where you plan to stay, and have lots of options. And so yeah, loads to know about. Thanks very much for your time and for sharing that. If you are considering becoming a guide and you want to, or even you're considering hiring a guide and you would like to know how you go about that, you can go to the BMG website where all Tom's information is up there and all his fellow guides as well. And you can find that at www.bmg.org.uk. And actually, I would also highly recommend checking out the BMG Instagram page, because there's some incredible videos and footage and route information. That's great. And then you can also follow Tom on Instagram as well at Tom Ripley Guiding. And all these links will be in the show notes as well for anybody who wants to look. We, of course, sell a wealth of equipment for your rack of 4 that you might wish to purchase before you head out to the Alps. And you can find all of that product at www.climbers-shop.com. And for a wealth of additional information, have a look at www.joebrownoutdooracademy.com.